Wonderful. Thank you, everyone, for joining us today. I appreciate folks will still sort of be trickling in as we go, but that's fine. If you can just kind of keep yourself on mute, would be great. Thank you for joining us at today's webinar. We're speaking on the National Pollutant Release Inventory, exploring that a little bit. I'm going to give you a few demos on the various data search tools that NPRI does have. And answer any questions later. So if you do have questions as we go through the presentation, feel free to put them in the chat. I'll try to monitor those as we go. But in the end, we'll definitely try to have a little Q&A once we're done our presentation. I'd like to introduce myself first. My name is Crystal Stamp Cardinal. I am the project funding coordinator for Keepers of the Water. Keepers of the Water, first I must acknowledge, Keepers of the Water resides and works on the ancestral and traditional territories of Indigenous peoples in Treaties 6, 7, 8, and 11. Out of respect and in the spirit of truth and reconciliation, I want to acknowledge that this is home to many First Nations, such as the Nehiyaw, Denisotiwe, Nakota Sioux, Anishinaabe, Netsatapi, Inuit, and Métis peoples. There is an intimate and sacred connection that, sorry, I just had to mute someone there. I could hear some feedback here. So there is an intimate and very sacred connection that Indigenous peoples in so-called Canada share with their traditional territories. And, you know, I do believe we really do have a lot to learn from each other. So in that, we are here today to share with you on NPRI. My co-host is Faye De Leon from the Canadian Environmental Law Association. Faye is a researcher and a paralegal with the Canadian Environmental Law Association. Faye holds a master's degree in public health. She has worked extensively on chemicals management, pollution registries, and waste issues at all levels of government, including the Great Lakes Basin, federal and international level. She has worked extensively on the implementation of the Canadian Environmental Protection Act. Faye was a member of Canada's Chemicals Management Plan Stakeholder Advisory Council from 2007 to 2020. She is a member of the National Pollutant Release Inventory Working Group and the Great Lakes Water Quality Board. Thank you for joining me today, Faye. So what we're going to do is we'll start our presentation. Faye's going to lead us off here. I'm going to just make sure I can share my screen. Her and I will be sort of doing a dual duty. She'll share the first few slides and then I will jump into then speak on doing some of our demos. So Faye, please take it away.
Thank you, Crystal. If you want to advance the screen to the second slide. Great. Okay, so I'm going to be talking a little bit about the Canadian Pollution and Transfer Registry that Crystal's been talking about. In Canada, it's called the National Pollutants Release Inventory, and it was first created back in 1992 with the first reporting year in 1993. What's interesting about the NPRI, I'm going to call it for short, the National Pollutants Release Inventory, is that it's a mandatory requirement for any facilities that meet a reporting threshold that's prescribed in the NPRI program, that they are required, those facilities are required to report under the Canadian Environmental Protection Act. And so uniquely, this is Canada's main pollution registry. There's nothing like this across Canada. There's nothing like this, I believe, across the provinces or territories. So it is the main place where facilities need to report their releases and transfer. Companies that are required to report, if they do not, and they fail to do so, and certainly provide false information, that can actually lead to some penalties. So that's a really unique aspect of the program. You know, the creation of it was done by a multi-stakeholder process that involved non-governmental organizations, as well as industry, government, and I believe labor representation as well. So that's The outcome is the National Pollutants Release Inventory. As I said, it was first established in 1992, with the first reporting year in 1993. What it does, it collects data regarding releases to air, water, and land, as well as on-site disposal, off-site transfer for recycling, and treatment and off-site disposal. Next slide, please, Crystal. This is just to show you those different areas of releases and disposal from any facilities that report to NPRI. It's quite comprehensive when you think about it, because releases to air, water, and land, that could include leaks and spills for releases to surface water, as well as disposal on land, off-site disposal. So that's really important, an important aspect as well. In addition, the reporting, as I mentioned, also includes off-site transfers, whether they're for recycling, energy recovery, or even treatment, and eventual disposal off land. So those are very unique aspects of the program. I'm going to go back to this slide, Crystal. Let me advance to slide 3. And just to demonstrate, just to demonstrate the number of facilities currently that report to the NPRI. We have about 7,320 facilities reporting in the year 2020. And combined, all the pollutants that they report on is over 5 million tons for the year 2020. So that's a pretty significant number. And then the map that you see is actually available on the NPRI website. And those are the map right now is demonstrating those facilities that report and the distribution of those facilities that report under the current program. If you go to the next slide, Crystal, we could talk a little bit more about the details of the program that includes about 320 pollutants that are recovered for reporting. As I said, 7,320 facilities reported in 2022. Sorry, that was an error on my end, 2022 data. They include carcinogens, reproductive and developmental substances, endocrine disrupting chemicals, criteria contaminants, which are sort of smog causing chemicals, and what we call SEPA toxic substances. Those are the chemicals that have been designated as toxic under our legislation, the Canadian Environmental Protection Act. And the type of facilities that are normally required to report under NPRI is quite ranging. There's nothing that is excluded. We cover off the mining sector, the oil and gas sectors, power plants, operators, sewage treatment plants, as well as chemical manufacturing companies, food processing companies. So the larger type of facilities that we know of. And generally, the government on their website provides some, not all, information around selected chemicals and the impacts that is associated to that affect the environment and health. So before we continue on to the next slide, Crystal, if you can go back to slide 2. I just want to revisit the importance of the NPRI program and the type of uses that we can consider when we're thinking about the data that's collected under this program. It actually helps to increase Canadians' understanding of the pollutants that are released in their community. So we'll talk about that later in terms of being able to access that data. It also helps to see if we can use that data to inform the decision-making process when it comes to environmental protection as well. We can also encourage the use of this data to promote a reduction in the pollution that we are seeing using this data. We certainly can track the progress of the pollutants that are released to air, water, and land. It also helps us to identify areas of opportunities to promote pollution prevention application that results in reductions of pollution. It also could support the way that the government assesses and evaluates chemicals that are coming before them as priority chemicals. And it is intended to really complement other tools, other pollution tools that are available out there, like monitoring stations for air and or water. It could complement that data to help support the other areas of work that we could use the NPRI data. So if you jump forward to, I believe, slide 7, Crystal. Just to, again, to reiterate the types of uses for this data. Number one, actually, it's what we call trying to get community right to know regimes in place so that people can actually stimulate, the communities can stimulate conversations around pollution data that exist under the NPRI. It allows you to very specifically search on the pollution levels that are released and transferred in your neighborhood. We'll demonstrate that later. And then create a forum actually to reach out to your facilities to ask them, if you wish, about their efforts to reduce and eliminate the chemicals that are being reported under this inventory. And finally, to advance and identify areas where we can look for regulatory and legislative changes when it pertains to pollution. And the final bullet there is being able to look at changes over time. We have the capacity using the NPRI data to be able to do that. Next slide, Crystal. And so some of the features you can utilize, and Crystal will demonstrate this, is trying to access the information that may be possible threats to your health and the environment using the data. Looking at specific facilities and what they're doing in your community is important. You can do searches on using the postal code for your community or others, and then looking up specific information relating to a specific pollutants. So that's really in a nutshell what NPRI is able to do. And then I think Crystal's going to demonstrate. And we offered the opportunity to people just to think about what they're seeing when she's doing a test and demonstration of what you could do in your own area to utilize the data. Go ahead, Crystal.
Wonderful. Thank you for that introduction to NPRI, Faith. So what I am going to attempt to do, which I've tried a couple times, is actually do some, I have slides with some screenshots, but I actually am going to try to do some live demo. So I'll go onto the website itself and sort of show you those things that I'm sharing within these next slides.
I need to take this lecture. You want to play some Play-Doh while I will listen to this lecture?
Oh.
Very important for me to learn this one.
I'm just going to mute everyone if that's okay.
To the flower pot.
Oh, there we go. Sorry, someone is listening to the webinar with us there, a little one. So going into our demo now, and what I'm going to be following is actually tar sands and oil sands. So I'm going to be following under NPRI does have some sector overviews, and one of those sectors is the oil sands extraction. So just to share, this sector overview explores NPRI substances that are released, disposed, and transferred by the oil sands industry. So businesses, institutions, and other facilities must report the releases, transfers, and disposals to air, water, and land annually to the government's NPRI. The information collected is public. It helps government set environmental priorities and monitor environmental performance, and provides Canadians with an opportunity to learn about pollution in their surroundings. So within the oil sands deposit, this information can all be found within the sector overview that's in NPRI. I'll add some links to the chat as we go for you to go through that overview if you want to know a little bit more what NPRI is sharing on that. So there are 3 large oil sand deposits here in Canada. There's the Athabasca, Peace River, and Cold Lake. So all 3 of the deposits are located in northern Alberta, except for a small portion of the Cold Lake deposit, which I believe extends into Saskatchewan. Together, these deposits cover over 142,000 square kilometers and are estimated to contain 166 billion barrels of oil. So according to the Government of Canada's NPRI site, the sector produces 2.95 million barrels of oil per day. So speaking on the various surface mines, the example that I'm going to be using today is I'm going to be following Imperial Oil's Kearl processing plant and mine. So there are 7 oil sands surface mines facilities that do report to NPRI. These facilities report on 70 different substances and substance groups. Almost 76% of the amount is the release of criteria air contaminants, such as particulate matter, nitrogen oxides, sulfur dioxides, carbon monoxide, and volatile organic compounds. So these things are things that recently have hit the news, actually, regarding some of the levels of information that's available, saying that the accuracy of the, especially VOCs, is quite off. But that's a discussion that we can enter a little later. So just to share where these mines are, I'm not sure if you can see the cursor here, but this is Imperial Oil's Kearl plant. Going from the top down, that's Fort Hills Oil Sands Mine. This is Canadian Naturals Muskeg River Jackpine Mine, Canadian Naturals Horizon Processing Plant. This is Syncrude Canada's Aurora North Mine. This here is Suncor Energy's oil sands. And then further down here, this is Syncrude Canada's Mildred Lake. I just want to share a little bit on this page here. And some of the work that Keepers of the Water does. One of our main campaigns is actually the tar sands and tailings. So we are absolutely opposed to any of the tailings, even treated tailings, being released into the Athabasca River. So just to share and why this is so important to Keepers of the Water is here you see this is the north end of Fort McMurray, the city. Athabasca River runs through the city. It then flows north between all of these various mines. So it passes Syncrude, Suncor. Following it along, it continues north again, passing through all of these various mines, heading north into the Northwest Territories. Imperial Oil, actually, there was a release over a year ago that was reported. So the date today, February 7th, on February 4th of last year is when we heard that 5.3 million liters leaked from this site. So Imperial's Kearl mine, that was about 2 Olympic-sized swimming pools worth of toxic waste. So we just wanted to kind of highlight that, you know, considering it has been over 1 year since this news broke. Really, nothing has been done to date. We haven't heard really much from government on any sort of enforcement that's going to be happening there, but we definitely are keeping an eye on what's happening with Imperial Oil. Next, I want to speak on, so we will follow Imperial in our demos as we go forward. Part of the things that we are absolutely against here and why we're against tailings and it going into the Athabasca River is that it contains so many awful chemicals. As I mentioned, 70 different substances are being reported, but there's some really big, ugly ones that, you know, that we're worried about that get into potentially into these watersheds that are leaking through these tailings ponds. They're not ponds, they're really lakes. They take up a huge amount of area. As mentioned here, over 1.4 trillion liters and counting. So I mentioned earlier, one of the past slides, that, you know, there's 2.95 million barrels per day. Times that by 10 barrels of water required to actually produce that oil. So 1 barrel of oil equals 10 barrels of water. So as you can see that why we're up in the trillions now. So we're really pushing government for other alternatives from treating and dumping into the Athabasca River. We'd like to see them reuse that water to be able to recycle it so they can use it, but unfortunately they're unable to actually reuse the water. They can't treat it to a point where they can reuse it in their processes. So it just kind of baffles me that what their option is then to release it into the river, which is a drinking source of water for many Indigenous communities north of the tar sands. So some of the scary things that we're following, lead, which can permanently impair, children's brains and nervous system development, mercury, which can have damaging impacts on the nervous, immune, and digestive systems. Arsenic and benzene, are well-established sources of cancer in humans. So these, and another substance that we're going to follow in the demo is naphthenic acids. So naphthenic acids is fairly unique to the tar sands, and studies have shown that it does have adverse impacts to fish. It is very toxic and persistent, but really has been under study on what those long-term impacts are on human health. So that's something we're pushing for as keepers of the water. We want some further studies on naphthenic acid. So here I'm going to share with you, next slide here, just a graphic on as I speak on these tailings ponds, right? So on the left here, you see highlighted, the little black marks are all the tailings ponds as they are in place. But when you kind of overlay them, as you can see, all those ponds, if you were to put them over this Montreal, you'll see how wide and vast amount of space that these tailings ponds actually do take up. So it is a great concern to keepers of the water. So I'm going to share in the chat here for those who may want to know a little bit more on that sector overview. If you want to learn a little bit more, you can go to that site to find out. Next. So now I'm going to start attempting a demo here for you on NPRI's dashboard. So I'm just going to share a few slides and then I'm going to hop onto the website to kind of share where we're going here. I will also add for you in the chat the tools link here. So if you want to follow along as I hop between the presentation and the website, you're welcome to do so. So this is the page, the dashboard, as you see it when it comes up. And then go to the next slide. Where I'm going to first explore is I'm going to go into the new Explore the NPRI data space. So when you first get on the page, what I've done is I've zoomed out of what the dashboard actually looks like. So I almost see it in three parts. When you bring it up on the web page, you'll have to scroll up and down to find some of the information as you go. So I've just kind of highlighted what the top sort of third of this page looks like. You'll find you can click, it's very interactive. You click and touch all of these little icons. You'll find more information down below as you select various things. So, and then in the middle piece here is where is the interactive map, that Faye had in her earlier slide. Is where we got this picture from. So here you can click on the dots, it'll bring up the facility. Onto the left, you can, onto the right there, select a sector that you want to search. And then at the bottom half is where you're going to actually see all the substances. So once you've selected your various criteria, you scroll down and it will show you in a visual way all the various substances that are in that facility. And again, very interactive. So if you take your cursor and hover over when you're on the website itself, a lot of different little bits of information will pop up for you to find. So I think that's something, it's an interactive tool that takes some getting used to. I am still learning how this goes. I'm going to attempt after this just to share. I'm going to follow Imperial Oil's curl mine. So what I'm going to do is I'll end up selecting non-conventional oil. The map will change when you do that, and it will show the facilities that are under that sector. So it here shows there's 39 facilities under the non-conventional oil sector. I then select the facility I'm looking for. And in this case, I know I'm looking to go to curl. When you make those selections and scroll down, you'll then see all the different types of chemicals and releases. Here, you can hover again over the bar chart and it'll show you a lot of information. So I'm going to attempt to show you that now. Let me just get to the right page here. So when you first go to the tools and resources page, as I shared, there's two different types of ways to search. You can search by the dashboard, which I've just started sharing with you. And a little later in the presentation, I'll show how to do some searches on the data search page. If you scroll down the page, I mentioned those sector overviews. Here are some other overviews if you're interested to find out more. Whatever's happening near your communities. I know out east, there's a lot of issues with wastewater. Hold on. 1 second. I just needed a sip of water there. And when you go to the dashboard, it takes you here. When you scroll down, you'll find what I was speaking on. Here is that page. Note, there's a couple scroll bars here. Here's the main page scroll bar. And I'm going to laugh at myself again. It took me forever to figure out, oh, look, there's another one. So you then got to kind of click and scroll around. It took me a bit to figure that out. I still kind of have a little giggle when I look at that. So I'm actually only going to focus on these two. I'm going to first look at this, and then we'll do the drill into data in our next demo. So when we go to explore the data, please note here, you can change the year you're looking for. So when you hop on here, you can scroll through to find a year. We'll stick with 2022. As I mentioned, I'm going to look for curl. Here's another thing to note. So as you make selections, this blue bar, things will change here. So you'll be able to see sort of what it is you've selected. I'm going for non-conventional oil. As you see, then the map changes. It brings me to the map page where I like to go. There's Fort McMurray. Here are the mines. I know where I'm going because I've been here a few times. Select curl. As you see, as you hover and click, these little pop-up menus will come up. So now that I've selected curl, you'll see everything changes here. It now tells me I'm only looking at one facility. It'll tell you that one facility in 2022 released this many tons of substances. As you scroll down, here I mentioned all the various substances that was released that year by that facility. If you hover over, all these little pop-ups will come up and tell you sort of what's happening in that space. We are going to follow naphthenic acids here next. So as you can see, it outlines how much, the quantity of that particular substance in that year. You can even click on these buttons along the side to change substances you're looking for. So just showing, as you hover all over these pages, all of this information will change. So I'm going to go back to our presentation. So I've just quickly done a search looking for curl, finding the information. You know, you can take some time going through the data, finding what you're looking for. There's so many different things you can sort of add and change as you go. So next I want to share a little bit about how to drill into data by location, sector, and substance. I'm going to ask probably Faye to kind of guide me along too as I go to make sure I don't miss some things, because there's some really cool things that you can find when you're doing these, when you're searching this way. Faye shared it with me yesterday, so I'm still learning a little bit how to do this. When you do click on that space, you'll see this is how it's broken down when you zoom out. So there's all sorts of different things that you can select on the top half. It then will demonstrate your graphs and information as you scroll down to the bottom. It'll also produce table for you, graphs on your substances. I had a question in our registration on how to actually see graphically some of the information, and this is where you're able to find, that kind of chart or graph or visual that you may need for your various reports. So I'm going to go back to the website here. One moment. As I go back out, we're going to drill into the data a little bit. So here I'm going to follow naphthenic acids is what I'm going to do in this particular search. So what I can do is I can type in the name. I did it a few times. Hit search. That'll pop up there. You select naphthenic acids, and I still want to only see what's happening in Alberta, right? That's sort of my focus right now. So when I select Alberta, again, non-conventional oil extraction, when I scroll down the page, it will show the graph of the years. So naphthenic acids has only been reported for the last 3 years. It started being reported in 2020. Faye, there is some other neat stuff in here that we can do, correct?
Let me just think, Crystal. I think the key thing about the graphs is it's like a display of the trends, right? So that's really an interesting thing. But if you went to the other, that bar that you're pointing to right now, you can actually probably do other searches for that particular, for Alberta, right? So you chose naphthenic acid in this situation. I don't think we tested this yesterday, but certainly if there's multiple substances that the graph looks different, right? So my suggestion is you always go back to your field of selection, the features you want to try to look at. So if you look at conventional, non-conventional, and just want to do a full list of the pollutants in that sector, that might actually be good to demonstrate.
So I think I've unselected naphthenic acid and I only have Alberta and non-conventional oil. Yeah. This graph should change, correct?
Yes. So if you go back to the list of substances and then you go to all,
did it do it?
That,
I'm learning. We're all learning. Oh no, they're still selected Alberta and non-conventional oil.
Oh, but naphthenic.
Oh. Well, we'll learn.
So
we could reset. That's another key thing when you're reset our filters. So let's try that. Okay, we'll try it that way this time, Faye. See what happens. Alberta. And we're going to look for non-conventional oil extraction. Scrolling down.
It's still, yeah. So for that sector, so if you were to maybe click onto the actual sector.
By facility, maybe.
Or by substance, it should give you that information. There it is.
There. So I've now I selected by facility. So folks, so you know, so then it highlights all the different facilities in here. Scroll.
Yeah, and those, just to point out, those NPRI ID numbers are very specific to the facilities, very unique. So once you know that, you can track a facility's performance, even if ownership changes and the names change.
table then comes up too, that you can scroll through. Always look for these little mini scroll bars as you're going through the site. As you see, there's a lot of information that we can pull up in here. This is a very wide search that we did, right? So
It is, but what's really beneficial of it, based on the graph and based on each of the facilities, is to see the performance from year to year, right? And I think the dashboard provides, I think, a 10-year time period, which is sufficient to get a sense of what's happening. And then you could do other searches based on the chemicals, or based on the facilities, do a profile of their chemicals over time, which is what Crystal did for that one particular facility in that region.
mhm. Thank you, Faye.
The pure oil.
So that is just a very basic where to start. Please, folks, feel free to, play with the site, find out, your neighborhood, zoom in on the map, go in the other way. I'm a visual person and I really like this, this way here. Faye likes the other way too. She likes to see the graphs and such. So I'll go back to my presentation. So we've done that. I've very quickly shown you some of the dashboard. Now there's another way to search. It is a data search. In this way to search, this was sort of the original database that NPRI had. The dashboard that I just shared is actually very new. I think it came out only within the last year or so. So in here, there's various drop-down menus you can change. You can go to open an advanced search, which I'll share in a bit, how to search by postal code, right? So if you want to pop your postal code in there, you can then find out what facilities are nearby. Here we're going to do, Faye mentioned NPRI ID numbers. This number follows the facility throughout its lifetime. So I know offhand, because I've searched many times for Imperial Oil, their number is 27506. So anytime I have a space that says enter an NPRI ID, if I put Carol's number in there, I'm going to find all that information. So then again, what I'm going to do is still follow that particular substance, naphthenic acid, and see what it comes up with. So once you've selected those things, you hit search. Those reports will come up for the various years you want. So you can do an array of years. I think in this case, I only did 2020 to 2022. So it pulled up the 3 reports, one for each year. You can then view that facility report by clicking on that link. The facility report for that year will pop up. This is the top half. Again, a lot of scrolling through the information. When you scroll down, you're then able to access the facilities where you can click on these tabs: substances, releases, disposals, transfers, etc. So I'm going to quickly show you how to get into this space. Folks, I hope folks are still following along. Is everyone still with me here? This is the page when you pop that particular website in, which I will add, folks, to the chat for everyone if they want to follow along as well. There you go. Scroll down, there's the screenshot that I had shared with you. I'm going to change this to 2020 from memory to 7506. And I'm going to hit open the advanced search. As I mentioned, I'm going to still follow naphthenic acids. Select that. Oops. There we go. Scroll down, hit search. And there you are. The reports will come up. We're looking at that one particular substance. It then will list for you. So it shows that these were on-site, off-site. So on-site disposals and these amounts from 2020, 2021, and then 2022. So that's a quick way to search. Before I even go to the next slides, I'm here already. Open the advanced search. I am curious what's going on in my neighborhood, for example. I'm going to go 5 years back. Here's where you can enter your postal code. I'll enter my postal code. You can actually, you only need to enter the first 3, for example. You know what's going to happen? This is going to give me way too many report space. So I'm going to just do 3 years. So starting with just the first 3 digits of my postal code, I hit search. And there you go. It'll list all the different facilities that are within that particular postal code. There are how many? 90 different reports that I can pull up. But that's a lot of reports. You know what I really want to do is I want to find out my neighborhood, right? Oops. And search just by my community's postal code. So I entered my specific postal code. It shows there's only 1 facility nearby that actually is reporting here. As you see, I live in Lamont. It's the city I live in. And the Richardson Pioneer, interestingly enough, when I look out my front window, I can see Richardson Pioneer, and it's a grain elevator. It's a very large grain elevator where the train cars come, and the only substance that they release is particulate matter. So very interesting, but interesting that a grain elevator is reporting to the NPRI. So that sort of is the postal code search. I'm going to go back to my presentation because I think we're getting near the end of our presentation. Oh, facility reports. I did a demo search. I had quickly shown where to put in your postal code. You only need to put in either the first 3 for a really broad list or enter your whole code. You can find a very more specific list that's within your community. Again, you can change the parameters, what reporting years you'd like. So lots of information, lots of ways to manipulate sort of the data in there to extract out what it is you're specifically looking for, a chemical of concern, a facility of concern. There are multiple ways to find information within the database. So I'll kind of pass it back to Faye, and she's going to share just the last few slides on some limitations of NPRI.
Before I do that, Crystal, so thank you. That was a fantastic demonstration, and I know Keepers of the Water has like active campaigns looking at CURL, particularly imperial oil specifically. I just want to share what we do at the Canadian Environmental Law Association, which I didn't say, but we are a legal clinic that provides legal services to people of low income, particularly in the province of Ontario. So I thought that was really important, but we try to advocate for community right to know and disclosure of information for the purposes of trying to be impactful in terms of decision-making processes. So in areas where we've used the NPRI data has been to support the work we do on law reform. Most recently, we've used a lot of data from the NPRI to support work to try to revise the federal legislation, the Canadian Environmental Protection Act. And one of the things that I would point out is we focused on mostly water releases from this data that was presented by Crystal. And I think that's fantastic. What we ended up doing in our project, our efforts, was to use air releases as well as waste information that was gathered through NPRI to demonstrate that in certain areas of the country, specifically in certain chemicals, what we're seeing is that there's a huge focus around reducing releases to air. But over time, what we've seen was that those releases to air may be going down, but releases to waste was significantly increasing over time for many of those chemicals. So that was a stark reminder for us that you got to look at chemical pollution in all sources of the environmental media to get a sense what's going on. And if things are really improving, the analysis has to go in the direction of, downward on all of those environmental medias. So that's an effort that took us years to sort of to do. The legislation itself was revised and updated back in June 2023. So we're now in the process of trying to continue to rely on NPRI data to demonstrate some of the progresses that have been made or not made yet under the Canadian Environmental Protection Act. So that's work that's ongoing. We've also used, and it will be released soon, is using the NPRI data to do our own mapping. We overlay other factors, other information in there, including measures of low income. So that'll be coming up, and that supports our work in terms of reaching communities, particularly in Ontario, that may need our services. So those are some ways that we can think about the uses of NPRI. But in that note, one of the things that we cannot stop or not think about is some of the limitations to the NPRI data. And some of that is listed on this page. We don't, as I mentioned, it only covers 320 pollutants. We have about 23 to 30,000 substances in the Canadian market. So we don't cover all of them. These are the big ones. And we certainly don't cover pesticide applications of those chemicals. So that's a real gap. Other types of inventory similar to the NPRI, like the US Toxics Release Inventory, covers pesticide application. We do not here under the NPRI. Similarly, we don't cover greenhouse gases and radionuclides. So those are big, I think, gaps in the approach. Greenhouse gases are collected through the Stats Canada program. And there are various thresholds that apply under the NPRI, and they're pretty high set. Employee thresholds plus 10 tons, what they call MPOs, which is the manufacturer, producer, otherwise used. So those are pretty high thresholds for many of the chemicals that are reported under NPRI. And smaller facilities are normally not covered. So that's again a huge gap. So we are seeing, a good look at the big facilities, big to medium facilities, with the notion that they might be underestimated in terms of not capturing the smaller facilities across the country. Next slide, please, Crystal. And just finally, just to note that we don't look at mobile sources of pollutants, including trucks and construction equipment. We don't cover natural sources like forest fires or erosion. So those again are big gaps in the program. And Environment Canada, our department, Environment and Climate Change Canada, when it comes to the NPRI, don't provide a comprehensive information about the risks associated with each of the pollutants that are reported under NPRI. You get some information, but you don't get a lot. And it certainly doesn't cover information on the exposure to people. And basically, the big gap, and this is where some thoughts are needed, is how do you capture the information so that it's really relevant to the permits or regulations and agreements that exist, whether it's at the provincial level or the federal level. So those are some of the limitations. But having said that, it does provide a wide range of information that could still be used to promote the dialogue that's necessary for the communities to engage. Crystal, over to you.
Great, thank you so much, Faye. That's kind of bringing us near the end of our presentation. One thing though, I forgot to mention that was kind of neat, and Faye did share with me yesterday, was those reports in the data search are actually downloadable, and you can create spreadsheets from them. If I recall how here, here we go. Right, so in these results, you can click on download as CSV, right? Faye, is that right?
Yes. Yeah.
And when we do that, it will pull up a report for you. Does it come up as a spreadsheet?
Yeah.
Like that? Ah, okay. I see. And of course, you guys can't see it, but
oh, you don't have it. Okay.
There it is. So that's how it would come up in a spreadsheet after. So just something I have a little note to myself that I thought folks would like to know that their things are downloadable. Other
So,
than
Crystal, we have some questions on chat, and we can field questions. We have a few minutes, right?
yeah,
Do you
please
want?
feel free. Oh, there, yeah, here we're at the end. Perfect timing. Here's our contact information. If anyone wants to reach us directly, we're definitely open to that. Both Faye and I, if you want to email us both, and we can find some direct answers for you if we can. I'm going to pull up the chat here. Let's see. I see a question here on, is there any way to link the NPRI dashboard to the Government of Canada weather app? Oh, that's a good question. I don't think there is any sort of connections to other databases. Faye, do you know that?
Yeah, no, I don't know if it's linked to any weather app. That's a good question. Maybe we raise it in terms of the working group discussion. But we do know that there's been some developments of apps using NPRI. So if that could happen, I'm sure, other types of apps could be considered. That was being done with university students trying to get a sense of what's happening in their communities. So that's a really good question. I'll flag that for future investigation.
Great. Another question we have in here is there any future plans to include these gaps? Where could we find them when we are dealing with cumulative effects? Pollution is getting worse, not better. Thank you. So, Faye, do you have something we can share with that?
Let me just read the question again.
Certainly, it's just up from Velma, had a question about the gaps, the limitations of NPRI, and where could we find them when we are dealing with cumulative effects?
Yeah, it's a bigger question in terms of how you use the web, how you use the data, right? Issues around cumulative effects. An approach to deal with it is one big issue that I think we face in terms of how to evaluate chemicals comprehensively. So that's one issue, but using the data to demonstrate how many chemicals exist in your community is actually quite important to take note of. Understanding that toxicity risk associated with each chemical is different, right? But I think from the perspective of NPRI presenting the information, they're not completely there yet in terms of an approach to use that data to assess that cumulative impacts. That's a conversation that we've been trying to initiate with the working group. So more on that, I think, going forward.
Great, thank you, Faye. Next question I have here, are these data collected by facilities themselves or a third company collecting? How accurate will data be? That's a good question. I'll again to Faye.
Yes, I can answer this. I think industry who's reporting to under the NPRI are given a wide range of tools to be able to provide the numbers that they present and submit to the government. That includes, the testing methodologies as well as the way that the estimation tools that they apply. So there's a guidance document that identifies what the facilities can do. And they are in close communications with the NPRI office when they prepare those annual reports. But I could say right now that there are third-party services that help and assist those facilities. And in terms of validation, that's always a question of, and we talk about this in terms of data quality. We know that some happens, but it doesn't happen across the board every year. They do spot control, and we've come across situations in the work that we do where there's been huge errors found and only revealed when other people use the data. So it's, so there's a value in, disclosing that information within the community itself. because it does create some level of accountability. I just want to say, we have Anna Tillman and John Jackson, who are also part of the NPRI working group. And Anna Tillman has worked on oil and gas sectors issues for a number of decades. But I offer them, because they've been on the working group for much longer than I have, to provide their input into this question. I think it's a really valid and important question to ask.
I don't
I don't know if Anna.
John is there. We'll put them on the spot. I don't
know.
need to do that. So, yeah. Oh, look at that. 1 o'clock. We did it. We made it through our hour. I am so grateful folks stayed with us. Some really, really awesome questions. Very thought-provoking for myself. Just doing these data searches, you can kind of get down a rabbit hole really quickly. So always make sure you have, pen and paper beside you to write that NPRI ID number down. That will follow a facility that you're interested in. I know there was somebody from Whitby, Ontario, who was concerned about a very specific facility. Please use the data tool to search that facility. You'll find some more information there. Well, thank you all. I'm going to stop there. I'm going to stop my recording.